What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. Yesterday I did a video talking about James Harden, and today I really just want to be more candid about how I really feel about him. Okay, I've tried to make an effort to be fair with some of these guys, um, you know, but I just got to be honest. Um, Supposedly today James Harden reported back to Houston. Um, I think that he knew very well what he was doing with the partying. I get it that these guys have been playing a lot of basketball over the last year and some change. And I was trying to present that argument for James Harden. But at the end of the day, he's not the only one. You know, LeBron James is playing more basketball than even him. And I know LeBron James did make a point about, that he thought the break would be longer. But, all those guys got to come back. All those guys that played in the finals, Miami, LA, they got to come back too. And they've been playing more basketball than James Harden. And plus, James, I don't like bringing up people's money, but you're very well compensated to play that sport. Even though technically all those players are underpaid, compared to the owners. That's another video. But James Harden pretty much has done everything he could to expedite his departure from Houston. And he has said that he's willing to go to the Sixers. He wants to go to a contender. You know, and look, that's understandable. He's 31 years old. He's going on to the downside of his career. And when I say downside, I don't mean that he's diminishing or he's going to suck, but usually after age 30, you begin to slowly diminish athletically. And, he's probably on the downward side of his career. Um, but this is my thing about James Harden. I think that James Harden, in a lot of ways, represents a lot of what's wrong with the NBA and the NBA player today. Um, I think James Harden wants to win, but I think that he wants to win on his own terms, meaning that uh, he wants to be the man. He wants to get the glory. And if need be, he wants it to be, you know, if not easy, not the grind that it can be for certain teams in the regular season and the playoffs. And the reason why I feel like that is from what I've seen watching this guy play over the last several years. Um, Look, him wanting to be the man, winning on his own terms, okay, fine. Jordan was like that. Kobe was like that. Didn't want to sacrifice his scoring. LeBron James doesn't like sacrificing his numbers. He wants to be the man. That's fine. The difference between those guys, though, and James Harden is that once they learned how to win in the NBA, they recognized what it took, and they did everything they could to stay on top. Michael Jordan, he started off as a team player in North Carolina, but it was going to the Chicago Bulls, who were in disarray. Jordan was the best one-on-one player in the league at that time. The coaches at the time, Kevin Lottery, Stan Alback, Doug Collins, they let Jordan loose to do what he does best. But it was Phil Jackson that reined him in and felt like Jordan had to be more of a team player and involve everybody else and not necessarily be the scoring champion. Jordan still wanted to be the scoring champion, but he figured out how to do that plus involve everybody else. Kobe Bryant and Shaq, people forget before Phil Jackson got there, uh, especially with Shaq, those guys were getting swept in the playoffs all the time. But Phil Jackson until Kobe and Shaq just couldn't coexist anymore, apparently. Taught those guys how to more of a they had the talent. It was more of a psychological and late game thing with them. How to win and winning time and all that type of shit. Get along with your teammates and get people involved in certain situations. And once that they three-peated. LeBron James, it was a complete 180 in how the media perceived him and projected him to the masses 10 years ago. It was, of all people, Dwayne Wade who showed LeBron James what it took to win in the NBA. And once he got it, he internalized that, and he's been playing at a rarefied level for the last decade. No matter if you don't like LeBron, but you don't think he's the GOAT, you still have to give him credit as being the de facto best player in the NBA the last 10 years. A lot of people want to say Kevin Durant and some other people, but if you look at the body of work that he's done the last 10 years, LeBron James is the best player in the NBA. Okay? Period. James Harden, to me, isn't willing to do what those guys did. Did. Whether it's Michael Jordan taking 500 jumpers, in practice, or whether it's Kobe taking 1,000, whether it's LeBron James outworking everybody in practice at the age of 35 going on 36, they are doing the necessary things to stay on top, or did necessary things to stay on top for as long as possible. James Harden, to me, doesn't seem to have that extra gear. And if you watch basketball for as long as I have, and even longer, you will recognize that. These young people, they don't understand that. These young guys, they don't understand what I'm talking about. Oh man, you just a hater. No, I'm just observing certain things that I've seen in other players, other flashes in the pan that were great, but didn't have that extra gear. Didn't want to put in that extra work. And that's why they were really, really good players, or really great players, or even Hall of Fame players. But they didn't quite get over that hump. To a certain extent, Charles Barkley was lazy. As great as he was kind of lazy. He worked, but he didn't work like a Jordan or a Kobe or some of these other guys. And that's why Barkley slightly both overachieved. He overachieved greatly in what people expected of him, but he underachieved based on what you saw of him in 90, 91, 92 toward the end. The same thing with a guy like Shaq. He underachieved in a lot of ways. A guy like John Stockton, he overachieved. Wasn't the most quickest. He wasn't the strongest. You know what I'm saying? Wasn't the fastest. But he was probably the best pure point guard of his generation. James Harden, to me, even if you look at his game, right? His game itself, it's sort of lazy. It's extraordinarily effective in this era. But what is his game, basically? The unstoppable step back move, which defenses are increasingly being able to contain more, and he complains about that. That's a pattern with him. Whenever there's some type of challenge involved or difficulty, he complains. Driving to the basket, hopefully getting a foul. He's mastered the art of drawing fouls, where he shoots at an 87, 88% clip usually. And he takes a ton of free throws, takes a ton of three-pointers. He's averaging 5, 6 made threes a game. That does add to your point tally. So, yeah, he puts up big numbers against mediocre teams. But when he's facing the better teams in the playoffs, that's why he's shooting only 40% from the floor during the playoffs, only 31% from three. And because he's not able to give defenses a different look, not saying that guys are, you got a lot of perimeter guys posting up today, but I'm just saying he used to have that in his arsenal. Occasionally he would post people up. you know, under Coach Kevin McHale, who uh, had Harden as a feature scorer, but he had Harden in more 27, 28 points per game range. Harden used to have a mid range game. But because he's not willing to give defense a different look and he just wants to play Harden ball, you know, I mean, look, that's one of the reasons. I saw some players today who have talked about how they like what Coach Steven Silas is doing right now. They're saying that the offense includes people. You know, it's not just one guy doing everything and everybody else standing around. It's involving other people. And to me, honestly, that's why James Harden wants to leave. Has nothing to do with fucking Trump. Be honest, man. Look, if this guy had such an issue with Trump and he was such a hardcore anti-Trumper, why the fuck were you wearing a gator with the American flag on it? Knowing what that symbolizes in this day and age. If the problem is with the owner and he's a Trump supporter, okay, he's been there for 2.5 years or whatever it's been, maybe 3 years. Now all of a sudden that bothers you. What it is, James Harden, is that you have been marginalized by the Houston Rockets. They're not feeding your ego. They're not involving you in personnel decisions anymore. They're not treating you with the respect of an elite NBA superstar. I'm using air quotes as I'm saying this. Okay. You don't also like the fact that there's new personnel involved, new general manager, new head coach. Okay. And they want a more fair offense. They want to involve other people. So if he had his way, your days of averaging 35, 36 points per game would come to an end. But you know what's funny? That's the mentality of a selfish motherfucker. Because look, Nate Archibald, the great Nate Archibald, one of the greatest little men ever. It wasn't for injuries, he may be the greatest little man ever. Nate Archibald, when he was playing with the then Kansas City Omaha Kings, was putting up astronomical numbers. 34 points, 11 assists one season. 26 points, 8, 9 assists. 20, 26, 10. Putting up all these great numbers. But he wasn't winning. I'm willing to bet that Nate Archibald was willing to take that sacrifice and go to the Boston Celtics and average a paltry 17 points a game and maybe 8 assists a game. But you know what? I guarantee you he had more fun playing on that great team, which led to a championship in '81 for him, than he did going through all of that personal glory of scoring all those points and dishing all those assists and being responsible for a mind-boggling, 45 points a game when he was with the Kings that season, 72, 73. At the end of the day, James Harden just wants to be James Harden. You know what I'm saying? He wants to still be able to put up 30 plus points a game wherever he goes at this point. Okay. That's what it is. And he also wants to go to a team where it's not that difficult a task to get deeper in the playoffs. That's another thing I think that's bothering him is that, unlike the LeBron Jameses and the Kevin Durant's, he's seen as a lower tier guy. So he wants to be on a team where he at least get to the NBA Finals, get all that personal glory, you know. But I'm gonna tell you something. This guy has gotten a lot of breaks. The media treats this guy with um, kid gloves, and that's one of the reasons why I will never, never go in on Russell Westbrook on this channel because the media does enough of that. Does Russell fuck up a lot? Absolutely. But so this motherfucker right here, and the media, and sometimes even fans. I look at the comment section. Somehow wants to only blame Russell Westbrook. Okay, this motherfucker James Harden right here. Okay, in those games that he's choking to me, what it really is it's a little bit of choking, but it's also this guy just is unwilling or unable to raise his game to another level. He's not willing to step. He's unwilling or unable to step up in big moments. And the days for excuses for this guy is over. All you have to do is look at the series against the Spurs in 2000. What was it, 16 or was it 17? When he disappeared, I think it was 17. When he disappeared completely. I mean, completely. Like it was to the point where I was starting to suspect he was throwing the game. I thought he was being paid to throw the game. That's how terrible he was. MIA in 2018 in Game 7 against the Warriors when they blew a 20-25 point lead. 2019 against the Durantless Warriors. Stephen Curry drops like 20 points in the second half or 20 plus points in the second half and put on a scoring clinic. Meanwhile, James Harden at Houston laid a fucking egg in the fourth quarter. True, he had 35 points, but the way he was playing the first three quarters, he should have had 50 because he choked in the fourth quarter. I think he had like 4 points and something like 4 turnovers in the fourth quarter. Okay? He has a habit and a history of doing this shit. That's why, to me, that's the reason why he's not in my top 10 on shooting guard. I don't give a fuck how many points you score in the regular season. It's what you do in the playoffs that determine to me how great a player you are. That's why I have the utmost respect for Klay Thompson. Sure, he has bad playoff games. Of course, you will have bad shooting nights when you're playing the best offensive player in this era. Usually, is the perimeter guy. Of course, you're going to have a bad game here or there. You're guarding the best offensive player on the opposition, every fucking night when you're playing. Of course, you're gonna have some shooting woes, but when it comes to elimination games, time and time again, it was Klay Thompson that would step up and make the big shots. I don't give a fuck about numbers. That's what you gotta understand about me. These numbers, that shit don't mean shit to me. Okay, there are a lot of guys who are in systems. Okay, that aren't designed for them to put up all these big numbers. Reggie Miller was in a system where he wasn't going to score a lot of points. He wasn't going to get a lot of rebounds. Glenn Rice, he was a scorer, shooter. Not saying he was going to have a triple double. I'm not saying that. Everybody's not going to average a triple double. Everybody's not going to be a pass first guy. Everybody's not going to grab 20 rebounds again. I go on an eye test. To me, I think Klay Thompson is great. I think honestly, he's better than Reggie Miller. That's just my opinion. People have to agree with that, but I think he's better than Reggie Miller. That's why I have him higher than Reggie right now. Now, longevity, maybe I would change my mind if Klay's career doesn't pan out the way I think it is. But peak for peak, I mean, Reggie was nice, but Klay's a better 3-point shooter. Reggie may be the better clutch performer, but Klay's is really up there too. Klay, what I'm saying, is much better defensive player. Um, Klay's been to the dance 5 times. He's won 3 top championships. That's just my opinion. But back to James Harden. Um, will he ever win a title? Maybe. Maybe. If he's on a loaded team. But, that's the thing we're in today. People want to win championships the easy way. They want to be on a super team. And that's what's wrong with the NBA today. Everybody wants to be on a super team. It's one thing when you're drafted and you build a great team like the Spurs. But it's another thing when you're just pilfering other teams or you're trying to run to a team that's already loaded and build a super team, think it's gonna be easy. Oh man, we're gonna go 75-7. Yeah, we're going 75-7, we win a title. Man, look, when I was growing up, the teams that you admired were the 95 Rockets, okay, who were on the road every fucking series on the road, every series. Whether it was them beating the 50-win Utah Jazz, the 59-win Phoenix Suns, the 62-win San Antonio Spurs with the reigning MVP David Robinson, or whether it was the new up-and-coming super team of the future Orlando Magic that won 57 games, was 39-2 at home, and beat them both games at the arena. That to me is what you call a run. That to me is what you call balling. These motherfuckers are just go on super teams and just beat everybody because they just got a loaded squad. They want to be like dream team version NBA. That shit not fucking impressive to me. What about the 78 Bullets that struggled during the regular season due to injuries, but got their shit together toward the end of the regular season, only 44-38, and had their run all the way to the fucking finals, go to game 7 and win a title? That's to me is impressive. You know what I'm saying? Even teams that falter, even teams that don't get all the way, teams that just come up short. You know, people talk about Kobe blowing that 3-1 lead against Phoenix Suns. They weren't even supposed to be in the playoffs, let alone hold a 3-1 lead against Phoenix in the first fucking place. Context, people. Context is everything. So then I'm just gonna end this right here. I mean this right here, man. End of the day, James Harden will be a Hall of Famer. But will he be a guy in the same trajectory or echelon as these other guys I've named? Hell fucking no. He's not. At least in my eyes. Maybe some people, they look at the numbers and scoring and all that. Well, I'll tell these people this, these new age people that. If you're going to give James Harden credit for scoring all these points, then stop belittling Wilt Chamberlain. Because I hear you guys say shit like, well, I mean, yeah, we'll score a lot of points, but he did it against mediocre competition. So James Harden scoring 60 points against the Knicks is impressive. James Harden dropping 60 against the lowly Bulls is impressive. Wake me up when he dropped 65 against the Lakers. Okay? Yeah, okay, occasionally he might have a 45-point game against a good team. But when he consistently scorches great teams, wake me up. One thing about Michael Jordan I'll say about this. Of the 39 games that Michael Jordan scored 50 points or more, 23 of them came against top 10 defenses in the NBA for that particular season. If you look at it, he's always having his. That's why he holds the record for most 50-point games in the playoffs. 8 of them, twice more than the second place guy, Wilt Chamberlain. Michael had a tendency to save his scoring barrages when it was best, it was most needed for the team. He didn't go around. He could have. He could have. He could have padded his numbers against the lowly Warriors in the 90s after TMC. He could have padded his numbers against the Vancouver Grizzlies. Think about it. Think about all those terrible teams in the late 90s. He could have padded his numbers against the Raptors and all that shit. He didn't do that. What was most of his high scoring games came against? The Knicks, the Miami Heat, when Morton and Tim Hardaway were there. All of his big scoring games, for the most part, came either against the upper echelon teams or a game where they really needed it. Like when he dropped 49 against the Clippers, who usually is a bad team, but they were on the stretch of a of a losing streak on the road, and they needed to win, and Jordan went all in that game. But anyway, the point is, great players save their best for when it's needed, like a Larry Bird, like a Jordan, Kobe. This guy, when they need it, I'm telling you right now, no matter what fucking team this guy joins, mark my words, it's not going to be because of him if they win a title.